The galactic hegemony had ruled most of the Milky Way for over 50,000 years. Their massive empire spanned thousands of star systems, and no species had ever challenged their power. They were the undisputed masters of space. Admiral Zix-Tar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Crystal Dominion Asterisk. At over 20 miles long, it was the pride of the hegemony fleet. Around his ship, 199 other battlecruisers moved in perfect formation. Each one could destroy a small moon. Together, they could crack planets. "Admiral, we have detected unusual energy readings from the third planet," reported his sensor officer, a tall, six-armed being with pale blue skin. Zix-Tar nodded. The hegemony had long ignored this solar system, considering it too primitive to bother with. But recent scans had detected spacecraft venturing beyond their home world. It was time to welcome them into the fold, whether they wanted it or not. "Prepare the grand entrance protocol," Zix-Tar ordered. "These primitives must understand the power they face." The fleet moved toward Earth with deadly grace. Their crystalline ships shifted colors as they approached, creating a display that had made 1,000 civilizations tremble in awe. The ships positioned themselves in a formation that blocked out the sun from parts of Earth, casting massive shadows across entire countries. On Earth, emergency meetings were called. Military leaders gathered with world governments to address the sudden appearance of the alien armada. When communications opened, Admiral Zix-Tar appeared on screens worldwide. His 4 eyes glowed with ancient power, and the translucent skin of his face showed the complex network of glowing veins beneath. He wore armor made from metals not found on Earth's periodic table. "People of Earth," his voice boomed in perfect English, "I am Admiral Zix-Tar of the Galactic Hegemony. For 50,000 years, we have brought order to the stars. Your planet now falls under our protection. Surrender your governments to hegemony control, and you will be treated fairly. Resist, and we will demonstrate power beyond your comprehension." He waited for the panic, the fear, the desperate pleas that always followed such announcements. Instead, there was silence. Then, something unprecedented happened. On the main communication screen, a human woman in a simple blue suit stepped forward. She was the Secretary General of the United Nations, a position the hegemony intelligence had identified as important, but not supreme leadership. She looked at the mighty admiral, his fleet capable of destroying her entire civilization, and she smiled. Then she chuckled. Then she actually laughed. Behind her, other world leaders were struggling to keep straight faces. "I'm sorry," she said, composing herself. "It's just, we've seen this movie before. Many times, actually." Admiral Zix-Tar blinked all 4 eyes in confusion. "This is not entertainment. This is your reality now." This only made several of the human leaders laugh harder. "Look," said the Secretary General, "why don't you come down here? We can grab a beer, talk about this like adults. Your ships are impressive and all, but we're not really into the whole submission thing. It's not our style." For the first time in his 300-year career, Admiral Zix-Tar was speechless. No species had ever responded this way to the hegemony. What was wrong with these humans? 3 days later, Admiral Zix-Tar and 5 high-ranking hegemony officials stood awkwardly in the backyard of the White House. They wore their formal diplomatic armor, covered in glowing symbols of their conquests. Each piece weighed over 50 pounds and had been polished to perfection. The humans around them wore casual clothes, t-shirts, jeans. One world leader was in flip-flops. "Would you like a burger?" asked the American president, standing by a smoking grill. He wore an apron that said, "Kiss the cook," and held a spatula. Zix-Tar stared. "We are here to discuss the terms of your planet's incorporation into the hegemony." Sure, said the president. "But first, food. Can't negotiate on an empty stomach." Nearby, other world leaders chatted and drank beverages from bottles and cans. Music played from speakers. Children ran around playing games. It was nothing like the formal surrender ceremonies the hegemony had conducted thousands of times before. Sub-Commander Vrelmax leaned toward Zixtar. "This must be some primitive ritual of submission," he whispered. A young human woman overheard and laughed. "It's called a barbecue," she said. "It's just a party." She was the daughter of the Chinese premier and apparently a physicist. She handed drinks to the aliens, who accepted them cautiously. "So," she said casually, "we looked at your ship designs. They're pretty, but your shield harmonics are totally inefficient." Science Officer Cuxalon puffed up his chest sacs in offense. "Our shields are the most advanced in the galaxy." The woman shrugged. "Maybe, but you're still using triphasic energy distribution. We abandoned that approach in our theoretical models last year. Too much power leakage." Cuxalon's mouth hung open. "But the shields work on triphasic principles throughout the galaxy." "That's probably because nobody tried anything different," she said, sipping her drink. "You guys have been around for 50,000 years, right? Maybe you got stuck in your ways." Across the lawn, the Admiral noticed another hegemony officer surrounded by curious children. The officer was showing them his ceremonial energy sword, designed to intimidate new species. The children were asking if it came in other colors, and if they could take selfies with it. The Secretary of Defense approached Zixtar with a plate of food. "So, Admiral, we've been wondering, why exactly should we join your hegemony? What's in it for us?" This was not how these conversations were supposed to go. New species were meant to beg for mercy and protection, not ask about benefits packages. "We offer the knowledge of the stars," Zixtar said stiffly. "Technologies beyond your comprehension. Like those ships of yours." The Secretary nodded toward the sky. "Our engineers have been studying them. Impressive, but kind of old-fashioned. No offense." Zixtar nearly choked on his drink. "Old-fashioned. They are the pinnacle of hegemony achievement." The Secretary shrugged. "Different approaches, I guess. Hey, would you like to see some of our ships tomorrow? Nothing fancy like yours, but we're pretty proud of them." As the evening continued, Zixtar realized something disturbing. These humans weren't afraid. Worse, they weren't even impressed. Somehow, this primitive species that had barely reached their own moon looked at the mighty hegemony and saw equals. It made no sense. And yet, watching his officers awkwardly trying to understand human jokes and customs, Zixtar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. The next morning, Admiral Zixtar and his inspection team arrived at the human space facility. They had come to examine Earth's pitiful excuse for a fleet. This, at least, would restore the proper order of things. Once the humans saw how primitive their vessels were compared to hegemony ships, they would finally show proper respect. "We'll start with our newest ship, the Curiosity *, said Commander Chen, the human guide. She walked with a relaxed confidence that irritated Zixtar. "It's nothing fancy like your crystal ships, but we're pretty happy with it." The first human ship was small, perhaps 1/500th the size of Zixtar's flagship. Its hull was a patchwork of different materials, with visible welds and repair marks. It looked like it had been built by children. Chief Engineer Krasdur snorted through his breathing slits. This vessel would not survive a simple journey through an asteroid field. Commander Chen smiled. "Actually, we flew it through the Kuiper Belt last month. Sure, it got a few dents, but that's what the self-healing hull is for." Self-healing hull. Krasdur's eye ridges rose in surprise. That technology is still experimental even in the hegemony. Chen shrugged. "We needed it to work, so we made it work." Inside the ship, things got stranger. The human engineers proudly showed off systems that, by all hegemony understanding, should not function together. Their faster-than-light drive was particularly disturbing. "You've connected the quantum field generator directly to the gravity well projector," gasped Krasdur, pointing at a central component. "That is explicitly forbidden in the standard engineering protocols. The energy feedback would destroy the ship." A young human engineer looked confused. What protocols? We just found it works better this way. Gives us about 30% more speed. But it's impossible, insisted Krasner. The human scratched his head. Yeah, but it works though. As they continued the tour, Zixtar noticed his team growing increasingly agitated. The humans had somehow developed technologies that the hegemony had deemed impossible or too dangerous. Worse, they had done it by simply ignoring established scientific principles. How did you develop artificial gravity without monopole stabilizers? Asked Science Officer Cuxalon, staring at a small device humming quietly in the corner of a room. Oh, that. Commander Chen smiled. One of our physicists was trying to make better coffee and accidentally discovered a new approach. We still don't fully understand how it works, but it's super efficient. A coffee machine led to a gravity breakthrough. Cuxalon looked faint. Happy accidents, right? Chen grinned. By the end of the inspection, Zixtar's team was silent. The human ships were ugly, cobbled together from mismatched parts, and violated dozens of hegemony engineering principles. And yet, somehow, they worked. Not only worked, but in some ways outperformed hegemony vessels that had been perfected over thousands of years. As they prepared to leave, Admiral Zixtar found his voice. Your technology is unorthodox. Commander Chen nodded. That's humans for you. We don't usually follow the rules when we're solving problems. So we've noticed, said the Admiral quietly. And for the first time, there was something new in his voice when he spoke to a human. It wasn't quite respect, but it was definitely concern. Admiral Zixtar paced the deck of his command ship. 3 days of interacting with humans had left him frustrated and confused. His reports to the Hegemony Council were met with disbelief. How could a primitive species be so unimpressed? It is time for a demonstration, he announced to his officers. These humans must understand the power they face. The next day, representatives from Earth's governments gathered in a large viewing room at NASA. On massive screens, they could see the moon Europa, one of Jupiter's satellites. The hegemony had chosen this uninhabited moon for their display of power. Watch carefully, Zixtar told the assembled humans. What you are about to witness is the hegemony's planet cracker weapon. After this demonstration, we expect a more appropriate response to our offer of protection. On screen, 5 hegemony ships moved into position around Europa. They glowed with brilliant purple energy that connected between them, forming a pentagon. At the Admiral's command, a blinding beam shot from the center of this formation. Europa trembled, then split cleanly in half. The crack was perfect, dividing the moon into 2 equal pieces that slowly drifted apart. The hegemony officers turned to watch the humans' reaction. This demonstration had made entire civilizations surrender immediately. But the humans were not cowering. They were watching with interest, some taking notes, others whispering excitedly to each other. That's quite impressive, said the NASA director finally. Very clean work. Zixtar blinked all 4 eyes. We just split a moon in half. Yes, we saw that, nodded the director. Nice job. Very precise. The Admiral's frustration boiled over. This weapon could crack your planet in 2. An older scientist in the back raised his hand. Question: how does the energy beam maintain coherence over that distance without atmospheric dissipation? Zixtar ignored the question. Do you not understand? We can destroy your world. The UN Secretary General stood up. We understand perfectly, Admiral. You have very impressive weapons. But would you like to see something cool? Before the Admiral could respond, she nodded to a young woman who spoke quietly into a communicator. On the screen, a small human ship approached the broken moon. It was tiny compared to the hegemony vessels, barely visible at first. What is this? Demanded Zixtar. Just watch, said the Secretary General with a small smile. The human ship positioned itself between the 2 halves of Europa. A soft blue glow emanated from it, expanding outward. Impossibly, the 2 pieces of the moon began moving back together. The crack that had separated them started to seal, like a wound healing. In minutes, Europa was whole again. The room fell silent. The hegemony officers stared at the screen in shock. "That's impossible," whispered Science Officer Coxelon. "No species has mastered gravitational reconstruction on that scale." The Secretary General's smile widened. "We call it our experimental gravity manipulation technology. Still in testing, but it seems to work pretty well." What she didn't mention was that the technology had only been successfully tested in a lab last week, and the engineers had been up all night praying it would work on a larger scale. The humans had been bluffing the entire time. But Admiral Zixtor didn't need to know that. After the Europa incident, the Hegemony Council was deeply concerned. They sent a team of cultural experts to Earth to understand why humans remained so unimpressed by their power. Lead researcher Mivlar settled into her temporary office at the United Nations building. Her team had been collecting human books, movies, music, and art for the past week. The walls were covered with notes and images. "It makes no sense," she said to her assistant. "Their civilization is barely 2,000 years old. They've only had electricity for about 150 years. Yet they act like we're boring." Her assistant, Tebnox, nodded. "I've been analyzing their entertainment. Look at this." He projected images from human science fiction movies, TV shows, and book covers. They showed massive space empires, planet-destroying weapons, and cosmic threats far beyond anything the hegemony had ever achieved. "They've been imagining empires more powerful than us for centuries," said Tebnox. "Look at this Star Wars from nearly 50 years ago. Their fictional Death Star could destroy an entire planet instantly. Our planet cracker takes hours and can only split a world in two." Mivlar frowned. "So when we showed them our greatest weapon, to them, it was less impressive than what they see in their weekend entertainment," finished Tebnox. A human assistant entered with coffee for the researchers. "Finding everything you need?" she asked cheerfully. "Yes, thank you," said Mivlar. Then, unable to help herself, she added, "I've been studying your fiction. Your species seems obsessed with destruction and power beyond your capabilities." The woman smiled. "Oh, you mean like sci-fi? Yeah, we love that stuff. My 7-year-old daughter is writing a story about a weapon that can destroy an entire universe." Mivlar's facial tentacles curled in shock. "You teach your children to imagine such things. Imagine, create, dream. That's how we progress," the woman said. "Today's crazy fiction becomes tomorrow's boring reality." After she left, the researchers continued their work. They discovered something else disturbing in human history. Unlike every other known species, humans became more unified, innovative, and determined when threatened. Other species surrendered or fled from superior power. Humans challenged it. Later that day, Mivlar met with the hegemony's top biological warfare specialist. He had brought their most terrifying weapon to demonstrate to selected human scientists, a virus that could target specific genetic patterns. The human scientists listened to his explanation politely. When he finished, expecting awe, a human writer who had been invited to observe raised his hand. "That's interesting," said the writer, "but in my last novel, I created a pathogen that could rewrite DNA on contact. It spread through electronic signals and could jump between different media, biological, digital, even quantum states. Is your virus capable of consciousness transfer?" The specialist stared at him. That's impossible." The writer shrugged. "It's just fiction. For now." That evening, Mivlar sent an urgent message to the council. Her conclusion was disturbing but clear. Humans had imagined threats and powers so far beyond the hegemony that our most impressive displays seemed primitive to them. And worse, they were working to make their imagination into reality. The message ended with a warning. "These humans don't fear us because they've been preparing for much worse than us since before they left their planet." The Hegemony Supreme Council met in their crystal chamber. Reports from Earth were troubling. The humans remained casual and unimpressed despite demonstrations of hegemony power. "We must learn their true weaknesses," declared High Counselor Vraxuam. "Activate the infiltration protocol." Within days, 12 specially modified hegemony agents arrived on Earth. They were shapeshifters, the hegemony's elite spies. For 20,000 years, no civilization had detected them. They could perfectly mimic any species down to the cellular level. The agents were assigned to key positions: government offices, military installations, scientific facilities, and educational centers. Their mission was to gather intelligence on human vulnerabilities and plant seeds of fear and discord. Agent Loxver took the form of a mid-level State Department official. On his first day, he carefully observed human interactions, mimicking their behaviors perfectly. His physical disguise was flawless. "Hey, Bob," said a colleague, stopping by his desk. "That report was wild. The ambassador must have been smoking something, right?" Loxver consulted his knowledge of human phrases. "Yes, the report contained many inaccuracies. The ambassador's judgment is questionable." The colleague stared at him. "Dude, it was a joke. Are you feeling okay?" "I am functioning at optimal parameters," Loxver responded. The colleague's eyes narrowed. "Right. I'm gonna grab some coffee. Want some?" "Affirmative. Coffee is a pleasant beverage." As the colleague walked away, Loxver heard him whisper to another human, "Something's off with Bob today." Across the city, other agents were having similar problems. Agent Kivnox, posing as a university professor, failed to understand when students were using sarcasm. Agent Zerval, in a tech company, couldn't grasp why humans kept showing each other strange images they called memes. Within 3 days, all 12 infiltrators had been identified, not through sophisticated security measures, but through their inability to understand human humor, irony, and social cues. Most embarrassing of all, they weren't arrested or eliminated. The humans found them. Entertaining. "So you're saying you're actually an alien shapeshifter sent to spy on us?" asked the director of the FBI, sitting across from a captured agent. "My cover is compromised. I will reveal nothing more," said the agent stiffly. The director laughed. "Look, we've known since Tuesday. You kept using outdated slang, and you couldn't understand the coffee machine. My secretary thinks you're adorable." In the White House, the president met with Admiral Zixtar about the failed espionage. "Your spies are currently being shown cat videos by our staff," said the president. "They seem very confused." Zixtar's skin turned a deep purple with embarrassment. "They are our most elite infiltrators." The president shrugged. "They're great at looking human, but terrible at being human. All that metaphor, irony, and cultural context stuff, it's kind of our thing." "You should have been outraged by our espionage," said Zixtar. "Honestly, if you wanted information, you could have just asked," replied the president. "We're pretty open about most things." The admiral stared in disbelief. "Just ask?" "Sure. Transparency. We're not perfect at it, but we try." As Zixtar returned to his ship that evening, he realized the hegemony had encountered something unprecedented. A species that didn't play by any of the rules they understood. The humans weren't just technologically unpredictable. Their entire way of thinking defied hegemony understanding. And that made them the most dangerous species they had ever encountered. Junior researcher Vistal was not important in the hegemony hierarchy. Assigned to the Earth mission as a data analyst, most officers ignored her. This gave her freedom to explore human history without supervision. Late one night, working in her small lab on the flagship, Vistal noticed something strange in the scans of Earth's solar system. There were markers on several planets. Ancient symbols carved into surfaces or hidden in unusual mineral formations. "Computer, identify these symbols," she commanded. "Symbols match precursor warning markers. Level Omega," replied the computer. Vistal froze. The precursors were an ancient civilization that had disappeared 100,000 years ago. Even the hegemony feared and respected them. Level Omega. What does that designation mean? Level Omega. Species deemed too dangerous for galactic integration. Recommended action. Avoid contact and quarantine star system. Her heart's racing. Viztal dug deeper. The warning markers around Earth were the strongest the computer had ever recorded. The precursors had visited Earth thousands of years ago and left with a single conclusion. Humans were dangerous. Not currently dangerous, potentially dangerous. Their assessment noted one trait above all others. Adaptation speed exceeds all known biological parameters. Humans didn't just learn. They transformed knowledge into new forms with frightening speed. Technology that took other species centuries to develop, humans mastered in decades. Weapons demonstrated against them today would be improved and turned back against their creators tomorrow. Viztal compiled Earth's technological history. The results were shocking. From first flight to landing on their moon, 66 years. From basic computing to artificial intelligence, less than a century. From discovering nuclear energy to building weapons that could destroy their civilization, less than 7 years. No other known species had developed so quickly, especially through their own violent history. Most civilizations that experienced world wars collapsed or regressed. Humans accelerated. Trembling, Viztal took her findings to Admiral Zixtar. "Sir, I believe I know why the humans are so unusual," she said, showing him the data. The precursors found them first and warned everyone to stay away. The Admiral studied the information in silence. "Does this explain why they laugh at our power? Because they know something we don't." "I don't think they know about the precursor warnings," said Viztal. "But they faced extinction by their own hands multiple times and survived. What could we threaten them with that they haven't already overcome?" The next day, during a scheduled meeting with human representatives, Admiral Zixtar couldn't help himself. He mentioned the discovery. "Did you know ancient visitors marked your system with warnings?" he asked. "They thought your species was too dangerous to join galactic society." The UN Secretary General looked genuinely surprised. "Really? First, we've heard of it. Why would they think that?" "Your rate of adaptation," said the Admiral. "Your species develops technology faster than any known civilization. Much faster, especially weapons." The humans glanced at each other. One scientist spoke up. "We always assumed all intelligent life would progress at similar rates." "You're saying we're abnormal?" The Admiral nodded slowly. "In our experience, species that develop too quickly destroy themselves. Somehow, you didn't." For the first time since their arrival, the humans were quiet, contemplating this revelation about themselves. Deep in the secure chambers of the Hegemony flagship, a secret meeting took place. Several high-ranking officers gathered around Admiral Zixtar. "The humans are too unpredictable," said Fleet Commander Dravkos. "They adapt too quickly. The Council has authorized immediate action." Admiral Zixtar frowned. "What kind of action?" "Elimination," replied Dravkos coldly. "We will gather our forces at the edge of this solar system. 300 more ships are on their way. We will strike Earth simultaneously from all sides. No warning, no mercy." "That goes against all hegemony protocols," said Zixtar. "We've never destroyed a species without." "The protocols don't apply to level Omega threats," interrupted Dravkos. "The humans must not be allowed to spread throughout the galaxy. They are too dangerous." Secretly, Zixtar was troubled by this plan. The humans were strange, but they had shown no hostility. Still, orders were orders. The meeting ended with plans to rendezvous with the incoming fleet at Neptune's orbit in 3 days. Unknown to the hegemony officers, human intelligence agencies had been monitoring their communications from the beginning. Earth's scientists had quickly developed translators for the alien language, and their hackers had found ways to access hegemony systems. In the Pentagon, military leaders gathered around a table with the president and other world leaders. "They're planning to destroy us," said the director of intelligence, showing them the intercepted communications. 300 more ships are coming. They'll attack in 3 days. The room was silent for a moment. Then the president spoke. Options. The Secretary of Defense sighed. Our weapons might take out some of their ships, but not 300. We're outmatched. A young intelligence officer raised her hand. Sir, I have a different suggestion. One that doesn't involve fighting. 24 hours later, a small human fleet of 15 ships left Earth. They were not their largest or most powerful vessels, but each carried diplomats, scientists, artists, and chefs. They also carried large amounts of food, music, and books. The hegemony fleet was gathering near Neptune, at a hidden location they believed was secret. Admiral Zixtar was reviewing the attack plans when an officer burst onto the bridge. Sir, human ships approaching. Zixtar hurried to the viewing screen. To his shock, the human vessels were already among the hegemony fleet, but they weren't attacking. They were positioning themselves as if for a celebration. His communication officer looked up in confusion. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessels. They're inviting us to something called a welcome wagon party. On the main screen, a human diplomat appeared, smiling broadly. Behind her, humans were setting up tables with food and drinks. Music played in the background. Hello, Admiral. We thought we'd save you the trip and meet you here. We've brought refreshments, cultural exchanges, and some trade proposals. We're calling it Operation Welcome Wagon. Zixtar stared in shock. How did you know we were here? The diplomat's smile didn't waver. Oh, we've been monitoring your communications since day one. Your encryption is very elegant, but our hackers thought it was a fun challenge. Now, would you prefer the spicy foods to be served first, or should we start with something milder? As bewildered hegemony officers watched humans setting up a party in the middle of what was supposed to be a secret attack fleet, Admiral Zixtar had a disturbing realization. The humans had known everything all along. They had just been too polite to mention it. The Hegemony Council called an emergency meeting. Gathered in their grand chamber, the 12 highest leaders of the Galactic Empire faced an unprecedented crisis. The humans knew of our attack plans and responded with, "A party," said High Counselor Braxuum, his voice filled with disbelief. Our intelligence indicates they have been monitoring all our communications since our arrival. Then why didn't they prepare for war? Asked another counselor. Any rational species would have armed themselves when they discovered our intentions. Admiral Zixtar, who had been summoned to report directly, cleared his throat. The humans do not react as other species do. They seem to prefer friendship over fear, even when threatened. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some counselors demanded immediate military action, arguing that the humans' unusual behavior made them even more dangerous. Others advised caution, pointing out that the humans had shown no actual hostility despite knowing of the planned attack. As they argued, a message arrived from Earth. The humans were requesting a formal meeting with the full council, not as supplicants, but as equals. "This is outrageous," shouted one counselor. "No species addresses the council as equals." Despite objections, curiosity prevailed. The council agreed to meet with a human delegation. 3 days later, 5 human representatives stood before the Hegemony Council. They wore simple but elegant clothes, with no weapons or armor. The lead diplomat, Dr. Sarah Chen, stepped forward. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," she said. "We have an important matter to discuss that concerns all of us." "If this is about joining the hegemony," began High Counselor Braxuum, "you must understand that membership requires—" "Actually," interrupted Dr. Chen politely, "we're not here to join the hegemony." Shocked silence filled the chamber. "We're here to propose a mutual defense pact," she continued. "Our astronomers have detected something approaching from beyond the galaxy's edge." She activated a small device. Above it appeared a holographic image showing dark, unnatural shapes moving between stars. "We first noticed these anomalies 3 months ago using our new quantum resonance telescopes," Dr. Chen explained. These entities are massive, ancient, and appear to be consuming stellar energy at an alarming rate. Their trajectory will bring them to our galaxy within 5 years. The council members stared at the images. "Our sensors have detected nothing of this nature," said one counselor skeptically. "Your scanning technology uses standard tachyon fields," said a human scientist. "These entities exist partially outside normal spacetime. They're only visible using quantum resonance imaging, which we developed last year." Admiral Zixtar studied the humans carefully. "Why come to us with this? We were planning to attack your world." Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "Because facing this threat alone would be foolish. The hegemony has stability and experience spanning thousands of years. Humanity has innovation and unconventional thinking. Together, we might actually stand a chance." The council chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. "You're not offering submission," said High Counselor Vraxium slowly. "You're offering alliance." "Exactly," nodded Dr. Chen. "Not because we fear you, but because we respect what you've built, and because neither of us wants to see it destroyed by whatever's coming." As the council members looked at each other uncertainly, one thing became clear. This was not how first contact situations were supposed to go. But then again, nothing about humanity had followed the expected path. 6 months after the council meeting, Admiral Zixtar stood on the observation deck of Earth's new orbital station. The massive structure combined hegemony crystalline technology with human innovations. It was unlike anything in the galaxy, just like the alliance that had created it. "Still getting used to the artificial gravity?" asked General Martinez, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Zixtar accepted the drink gratefully. "Your version feels different. Not worse, just different." "Story of our alliance," laughed the general. After weeks of debate, the Hegemony Council had accepted humanity's proposal. Not out of generosity, but necessity. The threat approaching from beyond the galaxy was real, and together they stood a better chance than alone. But no one had expected how quickly things would change. Human diplomatic teams had spread throughout hegemony space within weeks. They brought with them not demands, but questions. Why did this system have food shortages when the neighboring system had surpluses? Why did these species fight over mining rights when collaboration would yield more for both? Why maintain bureaucratic traditions that no longer served any purpose? The hegemony's rigid structures, unchanged for millennia, began to flex and adapt. "Your Ambassador Chen is currently on Proxima IV," said Zixtar. "She has somehow convinced the Volari and Zenthi to end a 1,000-year trade dispute in 3 days of talks." "Sarah has that effect on people," nodded the general. "She brings cookies to negotiations. Hard to stay angry while eating chocolate chip." Across the galaxy, species that had been subjugated by the hegemony watched in amazement as humans treated them as equals. Many had expected the humans to simply replace the hegemony as the new oppressors. Instead, they found themselves being asked for their opinions, their knowledge, their creativity. "The combined fleet will be ready ahead of schedule," said Zixtar, changing the subject. "Your weapon systems integrate surprisingly well with our ships." "Amazing what can happen when we work together," replied the general. "Though I still don't understand why you never developed nuclear-tipped missiles. They're so simple. The hegemony banned them as too destructive and unpredictable 30,000 years ago." "Ah, we built thousands before we even reached space. And that, thought Zixtar, was the fundamental difference. The hegemony had grown strong through order and control. Humans had evolved through chaos and risk. Both approaches had strengths and weaknesses. Together, they were formidable." On a view screen nearby, the first images of the approaching extragalactic threat appeared. The entities were clearer now. Vast, shadow-like beings that devoured light and energy. They had destroyed other galaxies before, according to the oldest hegemony records. "They'll be here in 4 years," said the general quietly. "Are you afraid?" asked Zixtar. The general considered the question. "Concerned, yes. Afraid, not really. We've faced extinction before, by our own hands, no less. Somehow, we always find a way through. Zixtar nodded. After months among humans, he was beginning to understand their strange confidence. It wasn't arrogance or ignorance. It was something else, a peculiar optimism born from surviving their own worst impulses. "You know," said the Admiral, watching the terrible shadows approach on the screen, "when we first met your species, you laughed at our power. I thought you were mad." The General smiled. "And now? Now I think laughter might be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy."